Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hashira Half Hour. I am your host today, Emily, and I am very excited to discuss the flashy ending of our Entertainment District arc, and even more excited for the Swordsmith Village coming out today. Oh my gosh, it's been such a journey, but we are so excited to be caught up now and ready to produce some new content for you with some stuff that even we haven't seen coming up pretty soon. Really, really exciting to be kickstarting off a new season. And today, of course, I am joined, as always, by Bryan and Hana.
What is up, everybody? Very excited to be here with you today. I think we've all three of us have been plotting for the moment where we catch up to what is new for Demon Slayer for, I think, since we started. We kind of thought about this. And so this has been almost half of a year in the making. And I'm really glad to be here to talk about it.
What's up, everyone? I'm Hannah, and I, for one, am just so freaking excited to finally be able to listen to the new OP on Spotify with the release of the episode, which hopefully should be coming anytime now. Maybe by the time this is uploaded, it will be there, and I will be listening to it nonstop. So I'm excited.
Oh, I sure hope so. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. It may be a grower. We've been very, very spoiled, at least for some of us, but it's going to be bomb. I can't wait. And on that note, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. We've got a hell of a finale to discuss here today. So dive in. These last two episodes that we've talked about, 10 and 11, are really extra special for us because one of the last times we saw this was on the big screen in Los Angeles for the world tour. So I think that some of our thoughts may bleed over from that discussion if you had a chance to listen to our review of the world tour. But I do think that getting to see it in that special environment gave us a greater appreciation for Tengen and Tanjiro versus Gyutaro and some of these final moments for season 2. Hannah and Bryan, any initial thoughts to carry over from our last episode regarding the quality of this fight?
I am just so thankful that we got that gift. I keep using that term because that's what it was like, this was simply just like a gift to the fans for being a fan of the show. I don't think, I mean, obviously anime has been like pretty popular in foreign countries for them for a while, but I don't think anyone expected the popularity of Demon Slayer in the world that it's gotten. And you can just tell like how much heart and soul goes into this series left and right, from the animation that we talk about all the time, the voice acting, the sound design, the OST, the OPs, the EDs, the logos, everything, to putting on events where they're gifting us with these large gift bags and they're bringing in these voice actors from Japan that are big name voice actors for them. And I'm just so thankful that I'm a fan of Demon Slayer, first of all. And second of all, regarding the fight, it was almost hard to go from watching it on the big screen, especially at the Orpheum Theater where we saw it like IMAX. The sound was just like perfect, to going back to seeing it on my TV screen in my home. Not to say that it's not as good, but I was like, oh man, like it really, really makes you appreciate just how well done this show is and how much thought goes into it. So just massively thankful, massively excited for what's to come, because it's just going to get better and better somehow. But it is, and can't wait to keep moving forward.
I mean, yeah, to kind of piggyback from Hannah, it's like, listening to something on a vinyl versus listening to it on Spotify. Not that I'm a vinyl aficionado. I'm going to take that step back there. I bought my first vinyl and it still hasn't arrived yet, but I know from research that it's apparently the closest thing you can get to like the true sound that was intended. So that's really what it was. Like we saw this in like the most optimal format, and there's no going back after that, right? But regarding the fight itself, I'd like to just give that shout out to Tengen for fighting with a dual-handed weapon with one hand. That doesn't make sense. Make that make sense, sir. Like at that point, you can't hold two swords. You're holding the chain and hoping that you can like maneuver well enough. So props to the man for holding the fort down. And also I don't even think I brought this as the question, but he stopped his heart in the middle of the fight to make it sound like he was dead so that he could stop the poison. Like, what? Who does that? It's
That
the
actually wasn't
flashiest
the
way to
first
do
time.
it.
That wasn't the first time I've seen that happen in a piece of media too. So like that wasn't like an abnormal thing for me. I've seen, and I feel like the last time I saw a character do that, they were like a ninja or something. I just can't remember what it was from.
Not to get on my weird theater soapbox, but it goes back pretty far, and I'm sure earlier than the example I'm about to give, but like Romeo and Juliet is one of the first ones that comes to mind for me because, you know, you've got Juliet kind of passed out in the tomb down there because she took a poison that stopped her heart, even though like she did wake up later because the whole idea was that she was supposed to run away with Romeo over there,
God.
but Mr. didn't take a minute to look at his surroundings, and we all know how that turned out.
Oh God.
But it is like an old concept in a lot of media. But albeit Tengen's use of it a little bit more useful, I think.
Oh no.
And that's on making it out of adolescence. But barely. What is he supposed to be like?
23.
23. Younger than me right now. And
Younger than all of us.
younger than all of us. Oh,
Not
okay.
when I first watched it. We were the same age. It was
Oh.
insulting to be like, he's 23. And so am I.
All the Hashira are younger than us except for Gyome.
How old is Gyome?
27. All the others are like 21 or younger.
So I will be the same age as Gyome until September. Great. All right. On that note, it really is a privilege to have been able to go see it on the big screen. And I think it has given a deeper appreciation, not only for this fight, but I think it did for Mugen Train as well. So hopefully this will be a pattern and we'll get to continue seeing some of these fights on the big screen. I really, really hope so. So anyway, diving in now to episode 11. As we left off in episode 10, Tengen is telling Tanjiro to run, although Tanjiro is so battered and broken that he's not able to move or even fully register what Tengen is saying. Gyutaro then causes a massive explosion from which Nezuko is actually able to save them by dispelling the sickle blood demon art. Pretty cool to see Nezuko waking up again so soon, for one thing, and then being able to help finish this off, right?
Oh yeah. Big props to Nezuko here. Of all moments she could come out of the box, this would be the time. So definitely great timing on her end. Now, I want to call to the animation of this scene because this was just gorgeous. This gave me the vibes from Avatar: The Last Airbender when Aang and Zuko are in like the dragon spiral of flame. This is what, like, I had to have imagined at least that this was one of the colors they saw. And I just thought that this was so well done because it was the way that the fire was being rotated with the circular slashes. It was very interesting to see because, obviously they're called rotating circular slashes. They're going to be in a circle. But the way that Nezuko's fire just like encapsulated them was really cool.
Man, we're on an Avatar Last Airbender reference like streak here. I think this is like the 4th episode in a row where we've brought it up. It's such a good show though. It deserves like its own episode at some point. Maybe we'll talk about it on the podcast at some point. Ooh. Anyway, I love this for Nezuko. I think also like when I saw the anime of this, I had forgotten, like we already established that like Emily and I at least had forgotten that the explosion even happened. So my brain was like, I don't remember how we get out of this. So when I saw Nezuko, I was like, oh, right. Like that makes sense that she would do that. Because it felt like we won, but we're all dead. But I also really like how we continue to see Nezuko's power develop, and this is just more development, but it's not like out of nowhere because we've seen it develop. And this is just kind of a new side to what her blood demon art can do. So I really like that we're continuing to kind of see her grow and strengthen, but it all like kind of aligns with it. So there's nothing that's just like, oh, well, that didn't make sense. And I think that's really cool. I think that's one of the things that the show does very well is that it's not just like out of nowhere. So good for her. I love it when she gets her moment. And of course, she gets a big moment here by saving literally all of them, including the wives.
Absolutely. I love getting a little bit more action with Nezuko in it. She spent a long time asleep before, and so even though I know that that was the right move for her a couple episodes ago, was she needed to like snap out of it and go back to sleep. I think it's really impressive that she was able to wake up so quickly this time compared to the years that she spent asleep before, and be able to help in such a meaningful way and such like a conscious way. So go girl. That's our Nezuko, and I'm so excited to see her continue to develop and for us to be able to observe that as the audience, and just see her continue to get more and more agency as a character.
Yeah. Also, where did Tanjiro find that new muzzle?
It's a good question.
Is it like a sock?
Ew.
No, there's an extra.
Listen, I love Tanjiro.
Found something on the side of the road and was like, this will do.
I love all of our boys, but I know that their socks stink. 100%. So we better not be putting that thing in her mouth.
All imagining now is like the yellow water.
Oh,
ew.
God.
Okay. All right. That's enough. We love them. Let's let them have a bath. I don't know. Maybe after this fight. They deserve it. Right? Anyway. So shout out again to Nezuko. She is holding her own in this fight more times than one, and she's back for the better this time after getting to sleep it off a little bit. So after this bloodshed has already been wreaked, she was able to dispel a lot of it, but that didn't stop a good majority of the town from being destroyed between this and like all of the fire and other explosions and fighting that happened prior to this. It's in a sorry state. And so now we're wondering about maybe some of our other characters. We've established that Tanjiro is okay. He's there with Nezuko. We quickly find out that Zenitsu is also okay, but he is immediately like crying. He's back in his fully conscious state, so he doesn't fully realize, I don't think, everything that's just transpired. But what he does know is that Inosuke's heartbeat is growing fainter, as he's like very sensitive to that sound. He and Tanjiro go and they find Nezuko, and the poison is spreading through, or not Nezuko, they find Inosuke, and they can tell that the poison is spreading through his body and that it needs to be neutralized, but they're too far away from Shinobu is like the first solution Tanjiro thinks of, but she's too far away. Sunrise maybe could dispel some of this poison, but it's too far off. It's still the middle of the night. And in this moment, Tanjiro realizes that Inosuke is not going to make it. If there's not anything else that he can do, until Nezuko uses her blood demon art again to burn away his poison. Pretty incredible that Nezuko has already saved them once in this episode, but now is able to nullify some of the effects of the other demons right up there with Shinobu and the literal sun are the other two solutions. What do you think of this ability of hers?
The literal sun. Interesting call out there. I want to quickly call out two other things that you touched on. First is Zenitsu being so freaking relatable. We had this conversation earlier. I'm going to bring it up, but first of all, him like screaming Tanjiro. I looked at Jordan the first time I watched this and I was like, Zenitsu's awake. There he is. There's the Zenitsu we know and love. And then he's like, I woke up and everything hurts. And I'm like, same kid, same every day. I'm 26 years old and everything hurts when I wake up. And second, and this is just funny to me, is how it's not a funny moment at all. Like Tanjiro is literally cradling Inosuke and is like, he's going to die. He's going to die. And Nezuko, like, obviously has already used his power to save Tanjiro. We just didn't like see it for ourselves. And she's just standing there. She's like letting her brother just sit there and cry. I'm like, Nezuko, come on, a little bit faster, please, sweetie. No, she knows that her brother needs to have his little monologue because it's Tanjiro. He likes to talk. And then finally, Nezuko is able to save him. And I kind of touched on this with, how her abilities just continue to grow. And again, this is a very new power. We have not seen her use her blood demon art to heal people, but it makes sense with what she's done so far. We've seen that her fire power does damage to demons rather than humans, and we know that she and Tanjiro seem to have some kind of connection to the sun. We still don't really know what is Tanjiro's breathing. Is it sun breathing? We've talked about it, but we haven't really established if it actually is, and we're leaning towards possibly no, because he wasn't born with the mark. And it's developing well. And I really love to see just how this new power is introduced. It's introduced in a time of need, but it made sense to the story. And it's showing we focus all of this sun power on Tanjiro. He's got the Hanafuda earrings. He's got this random guy that we keep seeing flashbacks of. We haven't seen his face yet. That seems to be really powerful. Shinjiro keeps mentioning sun breathing. But now we're getting Nezuko literally being able to do something that only the sun can do. And it's so cool. I can't wait to see more of her.
I think for me here, this one is really wild to me. Nezuko being able to nullify the poison. First off, the way that she did it, she just went. Ah. It's like so cute and derpy. And then like listening to kind of like Zenitsu wake up and being like, help me, but like I'm in less need. It's like character development, right? Because he's like, I'm in pain, but like you should probably tend to anyone else first. And I was like, nice job, bud. Like you can still complain, but make your point valid. Overall here, I think this is really interesting because it gives us that dynamic that not only Tanjiro is special, but Nezuko has her own form. I think that this power really reflects what Orokodaki manifested for her in her like deep, deep slumber, because right, the human is your friend, demons are your enemies. Anybody who would hurt a human is your enemy. That's kind of where I see that power deriving from, is like that continual mind training. And now it's no longer, training yourself. It's just putting it into practice. And I think that's what Nezuko's doing here, is just putting everything that Orokodaki gave her into practice. And I think just as much as Tanjiro was a mentee of Orokodaki, so was Nezuko, just in a different way.
I'm very interested to get to see how this develops, but that it's pretty inconvenient, I'd say, for somebody like Muzan, maybe, to have somebody who can kind of not only dispel, but eradicate the effects of probably a lot of the other demons. It's pretty convenient that she's able to nullify that poison so quickly. And that she uses fire to do it. Also very, very interesting that it only has an impact on demons or like their outputs, but the humans who are engulfed in those flames turn out okay. And we see that because Inosuke wakes up and he is saved by this power once again. So that's great news for our Kamaboko squad. Inosuke is saved. Meanwhile, though, Tengen is also fading away due to the poison. He's stopped his heart. He's gone through a couple different things, and he's coming up on his time here. And so he's trying to deliver his last will and testament to these three wives, and they are all visibly distraught. Enough so that Tengen wonders if he'll even be able to say his own last words and have anybody meaningfully hear them. Is this a moment where it's too much of a good thing with three wives?
Man, they did Suma so dirty right here. They really did. I actually filmed the TikTok of this moment this morning, because if you watch her face, and first off, right, it starts like bad because they're all derpy. Then she gets like angry derp. Then like that final phase, she looks like she's straight out of The Exorcist. Her head is literally facing the opposite direction of her chest. It's literally not physically possible. Okay. So I'm sorry that she turned into Emily Rose right there, but she literally all of a sudden became someone else. And so, yes, this is 1,000% that, because not only was, they interrupting him as he was choking on his own tongue. Nezuko actually did something about it, and they were all like, "I'm gonna spank you. Why are you doing that? It's too soon to cremate him." Like, did you not see his skin unwrinkle? Come on.
I love this moment because the very first start of the scene, it's like Tengen's about to die, but we all know that he's probably going to be okay at this point because of what just happened with Inosuke. So they really decide to focus on the comedy here. And oh my gosh, we are bringing back the comedy on full force here. The rocks just continue to fly by his face when Maki is like, "I'm gonna put rocks in your mouth because like you won't shut up," and it just like continues to fly by as Tengen's like, "I'm not gonna be able to say my last will and testament." I have to say, I think the face you're talking about, Bryan, when Jordan and I saw this for the first time, we paused and rewound about 4 or 5 times to laugh at the face that they animated Suma as. Like, that is peak comedy right there. She's like, ah! And her, she's like, her face is like, her nose like hanging down. Just
like her mouth, she's missing like the rest of her side lip. Like she only has like one corner of her lip, the other it's like into the void, and I'm like, what happened?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. And they just like are freaking out over Nezuko cremating him, and Tanjiro's there and not saying anything and like letting them like just like take Nezuko and like push her away. But I don't think Tanjiro's like fully functioning at this moment. He's just kind of standing there like it's so chaotic and it's so great. I love it when they take these like supposedly serious moments and just make them wildly funny.
I completely agree. We haven't had a funny moment in a little bit here, and I love that like Tengen is this super flashy character. He commands attention and his presence is like very captivating in a room, and it doesn't matter when the 3 wives are around and they're freaking out because he's like trying to be serious for once and they are just not having it. And like if what happens next hadn't happened, he very well might have not been able to even say his last words. So we love the overly doting wives. But fortunately for Tengen, Nezuko does quickly come over and she is able to nullify Tengen's poisoning as well, much to the dismay of all 3 of the wives. And everything that you've all just said, he is healed, and then they are all very grateful. Although he is still recovering. He's kind of gone through a lot. He's also missing a full hand here. So Tanjiro kind of urges him to stay put while he goes to look for the heads that Gyutaro and Ducky both just lost. He finds them not too far off, and he hears them arguing with each other. They're still able to talk and communicate at this point, not fully disintegrated, and they are insulting and berating one another, even in what is their final moments. Tanjiro takes a moment to try to stop them. What do you think of Tanjiro trying to ensure that their last moments aren't spent arguing?
It's so him. I think part of this is him just genuinely not understanding how you could possibly do this. I think he just does not get the idea of being so upset with your sibling in your moments of death that you just argue with them. And it makes him sad because he can put himself in their shoes a little bit. Like, he obviously hasn't been in the situation where like they're literally about to, like they're dying and there's nothing that they can do, right? But I'm sure him and Nezuko have had arguments in the past, like that's normal for siblings. But to take this time where these are your last moments together, I think Tanjiro and Nezuko both would do everything they can, even if they're angry at each other, to forgive each other and have those last moments be special. So I think it kind of comes from like obviously that side of him that's so empathetic. He doesn't want them to be arguing because he just wants them to be happy, like when in whatever afterlife they have to go to. but also he just doesn't fully understand why you would do that. Like, because he's so close with his sister, and they seemed really close too. So it's like, why are they doing that now? And also, side note, Tanjiro got blood of an upper moon demon, which I cheered a little bit when that happened, since he didn't get blood from Enmu or Akaza. And we forgot that this is kind of like important that he does that. So yay, that's a big celebration that can really help our story here. So I wanted to say that.
Yeah, important to remember that later.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Speaking of the blood collection, last time we saw that was against Kyogai. And that was when he was like, Kyogai, you were so cool. Let me get your blood right quick. So flashback to that, right? Now it's a little bit different, which is nice. So, but Tanjiro can't imagine that for himself. And kind of like Hannah said, right? Like, I don't think he can ever imagine a reality in which he is having his final moments spent telling Nezuko she's wrong. Now, that's not to say that I don't understand why that's happening, because of course, right, there's a lot at play here, and both of them had their faults. But Tanjiro intervening in this moment is, I guess, to a certain extent, like, there's this quote I really like. To know something is good. So Tanjiro knows empathy, right? To do something is God. Tanjiro expresses his empathy for both of them and gives them peace in their final moments. So I think it's just a very canon moment of his personality being demonstrated.
Absolutely. This is like a real moment of maturity for him. And we've seen this before. This is like to reference Naruto once again, this is almost like the talk no jutsu that Naruto's famous for, and like talking people down instead of like fighting them. And obviously we've just seen an incredible fight. There's gonna be fighting in this show, but as we've seen with other demons, high and low in the show, Tanjiro shows them respect that they wouldn't see anywhere else, I think, in their final moments. And because these two parallel Tanjiro and Nezuko so closely, and I think that on both ends they're keenly aware of that, he has probably a sense of gratitude that it's not him and Nezuko that are in that position when they so easily could have been. I think it's important to try, not necessarily to scold, even though I think that's how it's perceived, but just to try to encourage that last opportunity that there is for kinship in the siblings. So very on brand for our boy. And then we see the final moments of these two demons. We see that the bickering doesn't necessarily end, and then the fear emerges as well. And as Daki is begging Gyutaro to figure out how to somehow make it stop, she passes on to whatever the next realm might be for demons. And it's only as she dies that Gyutaro remembers his sister's true name, Ume, not Daki. And he begins to reflect on their human life together. We see a flashback that shows that he was battered and abused until his sister was born. And then he became a debt collector using a sickle that started off as a toy, obviously became a major part of his identity. And he found success, at least temporarily, as a debt collector, while she reaped the benefits of her natural beauty. And this all went fine until he finds her body charred and burnt to a crisp for bringing harm to a samurai by blinding him in one eye with a hairpin. He then claims that no one should get to collect from him in this moment, referring to his dying human sister at the time, when he's always been the one that already had things taken away. I was very struck by this. So I wanted to ask, what do you think about him describing Ume, or the privileges that his association to her brings him, as something to be collected or taken when she dies? It almost makes her sound like a material good, or that there is more of a transactional component to this relationship. I don't know. What did you think about this?
There's a lot here, and I don't want to take up too much time on this one. because I don't want to go on a spiral myself because I have a lot to say. Starting really quickly with the name Ume. Now, with this being said, Japanese is a very interesting language. Hana has taught us a lot about it. I will give you a small tidbit that I ran by Hana beforehand for accuracy. So, with that being said, Ume is actually known as the disease syphilis. Now, with that being said, Daki and Gyutaro's mother was also a prostitute. So I'm reading this off of an article. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that an STD was led to her demise. Most people believe that the nature of this disease was syphilis, known as baidoku in Japanese. This is because the words for ume and bai are interchangeable in Japanese. So she was named after the word syphilis, which big sad. But to expound upon the point of being a material good, yes, to start, if she's named after the disease that killed her mother, she isn't a material good because she is a thing. She is no longer a name with meaning. Her name literally means pain and agony. So yes, she is, to start her entire life, a material good, but then the relationship between them isn't really sibling like. We see what even in this messed up world, an ideal sibling relationship should look like through Tanjiro and Nezuko. That is not what we're demonstrated in these scenes, right? We see that he is providing the physical requirements for survival, as in shelter, as in protection, while she is providing the social needs for survival. So really, it is a transaction where she's using his strength and his, demeanor to make sure she gets to sleep at night, while he's using her for money. There is a transaction there. And, Gyutaro, being the one here who kind of has to lead because he's older, feels that essentially, yeah, some of his points were taken away. Some of his social movement was taken away. Yeah.
Agreed. And I'm going to add a little caveat to what Bryan said about Japanese, since I'm learning it. I feel like I need to, because that last statement that he made about it, like a word or something being two different sayings. Japanese kanji all has two different sayings because kanji was introduced to them by the Chinese when the Japanese did not have their own written language yet. And they said, hey, use our alphabet. And then everything that's come from it, like hiragana and katakana, is derived from kanji. And there's two sayings. So when it comes to kanji, there's onyomi and kunyomi. I cannot remember which one is which, but one is the Chinese pronunciation and one is the Japanese pronunciation. And they do interchange depending on if it's a name or if it's, there's a context in the sentence. So fun little fact that Bryan kind of touched on as well with Ume's name. That being said, I don't know if I necessarily think he was saying that as if she were a material good. We have just seen his absolute horrible life unfold in front of our eyes. From the day he was born, from before the day he was born, he has had it hard. He has had a mother who never wanted him because it was seen as an extra mouth to feed. He was ugly, so because he lived in the entertainment district, people threw rocks at him and called him names, which are the same names that he called Tanjiro in the last episode, which further, talks about the fact that he was just finally feeling like he was better than someone. So he was using those words at Tanjiro. And he's had a very hard life. And with Ume's birth, things did change for him. Does that mean that he feels like he has a possession over her? Possibly, because it seems like, I don't know exactly when their mother died. They don't really specify that. And also, according to Google, Gyutaro was 13 years older than her. I'm not sure if I fully believe that, but I think it's obvious that he's quite a bit older than her. He just looks younger because he has he was malnutrition. So, but that being said, I think he, at the end of the day, is a very selfish person because of everything that he's gone through. He's not a good person. It's not like everything that he's done can justify the fact that he was beating people up as a tax collector or doing like the crimes that he was committing. But his relationship with Ume, I think, is a little bit more complicated. I think there's a part of it that is very like he owns her, but he also knows that without her, he wouldn't be able to do what he's doing. So he has been through all this, and now he's saying, like, why are you still collecting from me and not giving me a damn thing, right? Because he just, when he finally gets a good thing, it gets taken away from him. And and I don't know if that means that he sees her as material good. I think it's kind of 50-50. I think he sees her as his little sister that he wants to protect, but he also is like, what am I do without her? Because the beauty of her was keeping him alive, really. So I can see both sides.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense that it is a little bit of both. I do think that there is some affection deep down. I think that it's long been lost to the translation of like living life as a demon and straying further and further and further from humanity. But I do think that at some point, way back down the line, she was just a beloved little sister. And I think that we've seen that, like you said, Bryan demonstrated the way that it should be in a relationship like Tanjiro and Nezuko, and they've just like strayed so far from that. So it's very sad. But on the flip side, because he is so selfish and he just kind of had to be for his own survival, I can see him seeing it as a transaction to benefit from as well, especially in this flashback that may not be completely reliable given how far removed it is. Yeah, just interesting. I thought it was an interesting choice of words for a brother holding his sister in what were her dying moments. But she's not dead yet, and there's still more to come, because as Gyutaro is holding dying Ume in his arms, the samurai that she attacked and the female manager of the hotel, or the brothel that she worked at, come to take a look at Ume's body. The samurai slashes Gyutaro, so we think that he is dead here as well for a moment. And as the samurai and the manager are assessing the scene, Gyutaro quickly bounces back to life and kills the female manager in one motion with his sickle, and then he kills the samurai as well. And he proclaims that the samurai has always known a life of comfort and shouldn't be so upset over one, quote, measly eye. This is interesting to me again, and words matter. What do you think about this and how it differs from the general sentiment that we're all familiar with, an eye for an eye? Interesting too, I think, here, as we're talking about this eye imagery, that he lends an eye to Daki during the demon fight, when the taking of an eye is kind of what started everything here. Thoughts?
I mean, you're right. I think, again, it just kind of shows the parallels and nuance of the story, that he would give her an eye when her taking the eye of a samurai is what got them to be in the position they're in. Yeah, I mean, it is, and I actually kind of thought of that too when he was like over one measly eyeball, that they're, did what Ume did bad? Yes. Like, we don't really know the extent of why she decided to stab him in the eye, but we can assume it wasn't for really much of a reason, because Gyutaro taught her to take before, getting taken from, right? But an eye for an eye would be then, to maybe, I don't know, just to be very specific and literal, they should have just stabbed her in the eye, like whatever. And instead they bind her hand and feet and burn her to death, or almost to death. And so it's not an eye for an eye. It's an eye for a life, which is crazy to me. I think I'm going to talk about it in a couple questions when we talk a little bit more about that. But there are some interesting parallels here that I want to talk about in a moment. So I'll let Bryan go.
I think the eyes have always been kind of focused on in Demon Slayer. And I think I'm saying that out of not just like of, antagonist or protagonist. Obviously, like with the demons, right? If they're in the upper ranks, you have the markings in your eyes. Tanjiro's eyes have always been a little bit special. They're red. So that's kind of cool. But really, the eye in this moment, I think, is a little bit of a metaphorical, right? Eye for an eye, if you will. But also, it's a little bit of like a jab at the samurai, and a jab at really everyone in the entertainment district. Because I think the comment itself, it calls attention to the caste system that is already in place in the entertainment district, right? Like, yes, he's blind in that eye. Sure. That's definitely imperative to kind of the rest of his life and debilitating. However, there's no, and I mean, not that I'm saying anyone has to struggle worse, but having to worry about where your next meal is coming from, or if you don't eat over the next day, you're going to die. I believe that just provides you a little bit more of a scarcity and a little bit more of a context of danger than maybe having the social status of a samurai who's able to walk the streets of the entertainment district without any fear. I think there's very different contexts that come with those consequences. And so I think at this point, it's Gyutaro, excuse me, raging against the machine a little bit, if you will. Out of the right reasons and out of maybe, maliciousness and such like that. Yes. Do I think I still somewhat agree with him? Unfortunately, yes. I kind of agree with Gyutaro in this moment. Like, you burnt my sister alive when really she said no. And again, what is this scene that we're talking about, right? This scene, at least from the way I interpreted it, was akin to a rape scene. So that's where I'm coming from with this context, that she was doing this out of self-defense when she was no longer comfortable being that used good, trying to gain some sort of agency for herself. And then at that point, she had decided that it was time for her to like fight back, and this is what she gets for it. I mean, there's only so much that can be done from her end, because she was like 12 or 13 at that time versus a samurai who's maybe been training for 20 years of his life. And then, a manager who had the Karen haircut of the Taisho era. It's not fair.
Not the Karen haircut. The care cut. No. No, I completely agree, Bryan. I'm like, and I think the Demon Slayer does this really well in like, does it make the choice that they made correct? Probably not. But it's a show about choices, and these flashbacks that we get of their human lives do humanize them a bit. And so it's like, what would I have done in that situation? I can't really blame them. Like, if it was self-defense, like, I think we would have, like, if we'd seen that clearly, I think we would have all been rooting for Ume or for Daki. And so, like, does that make the samurai right? Like, no. And yet that's like the human character. So it's really hard to say. But I like what you said also, Hana, about like an eye for a life, and Bryan, what you said about like the caste system. And it just goes to show that even when they were human, they were so low in the rankings that would be the equivalent payment or exchange kind of thing, is like, you stabbed this upper class citizen in the eye, you will pay for that with your life, because that is of equal value. And how could they not want to rebel against that machine that you mentioned? It's like the worst that humanity has to offer, and that's all that they've known. So we obviously have a lot more context, but it helps us to understand, I think, where their choices came from. So that being said, they only know what they know. And at this point, Gyutaro is carrying Daki through the district, and no one will help, because these are the lowest of the low. Daki or Ume is dying. Gyutaro still got like lashed across the back by the samurai, so he's dying as well. They're both in their final moments. They're both suffering fatal wounds. And then in this flashback, an upper rank 6 demon appears. And this is a character we've not seen before. He offers them a deal. and is curious to see whether they'd be able to rise the ranks if he turns them into demons at this point. Obviously, we know how that turns out. What do you think of this mysterious new character and the role that he's going to play?
Ah, my man hit the screen. I'm going to try and talk because quite literally, this is uploading for the day, so everyone else will get to see this now. But the man himself has finally hit the screen. I like that he was upper 6 at this time. I think it's very interesting. And I'm sure that I, took this and just amoebaed it into my brain from our conversations before podcast times. But it was really interesting that this demon that we're seeing right now, this demon with these rainbow eyes, first off, eye animation, gorgeous. The minute I saw him, I knew I was interested. But he's upper 6, offering it to a brother and sister on their deathbed, which we just saw last episode, where Gyutaro was in the same position saying, let me, as upper 6, help you join the demon ranks. And so a very interesting kind of chain reaction there that's caused. I definitely think it speaks to the generational growing of hatred and, these bad qualities that we usually don't like to see in humanity. But I think it provides the truth of humanity as well, in the sense that, we may not see it obviously as, someone's sister being burned alive, or, I mean, you might sometimes. Unfortunately, the world is kind of scary, but, we see that this is kind of an exemplification of what happens in the real world as generations continue with the same unresolved trauma.
Oh, I follow that up. So this character was very interesting, very mysterious, and is voiced by the same voice actor as Light Yagami from Death Note. So he's got that eerie kind of evil sound. He clearly is evil. Okay, let me rephrase that. He clearly likes to have fun by the way he's talking and the way he's holding a dead body, and has been clearly savoring that. It's definitely a mystery because we obviously have known Daki and Gyutaro to be upper 6, and this demon is currently upper 6, but we know this is a flashback. So there's kind of a mystery with that, Did they take his spot? Is he higher? We'll find out, but it's definitely an interesting aspect to the story. We still have a lot of demons to meet, so really exciting. And Bryan, I really like that you called that out about Gyutaro offering a brother and sister on their kind of on their deathbed the same thing, because I never thought about that parallel, that he did the exact same thing for Tanjiro, just the last episode, because it does show more parallels, but it kind of splinters off because Tanjiro, his reaction is very different, because obviously Tanjiro's absolutely not, right? And Gyutaro is absolutely yes. His veins are popping. He's so excited. So it's definitely another interesting story nuance that I didn't think about before. So thanks for bringing that up.
Sorry, I just thought about the time when I didn't know what bricked up meant, and we brought it up in conversation. And I was about to say Gyutaro was bricked up, man, and I was
No.
that's not correct.
This episode is PG-13. Oh my gosh, but I completely agree with each of you, and I don't know that I even have any more I can really add. I hadn't put together that parallel either, Bryan, so thank you for sharing. And it's absolutely true, and how interesting that they would model after their mentor, possibly. I don't know. We'll have to learn a little bit more about this mysterious demon, hopefully, but he certainly seems strong, doesn't he? Guess we'll find out. To kind of finish off the story of Gyutaro and Daki, we see Gyutaro, as he is also dying, reflect once more on how Daki or Ume turned out. And he wonders if she had been born under different circumstances, to different parents, in a different city, if things had just been different, how she might have turned out. the reality is he did raise her and they did turn out the way that they did. And as we can tell, these two characters absolutely parallel our two main characters, Tanjiro and Nezuko. And several times throughout this podcast, we've talked about choices. Do you think if some of those factors had been the same or different, that they could have turned out more like Tanjiro and Nezuko? Or the reverse, if Tanjiro had been in the mountain home the day that his family was slaughtered, could they have turned out more like Daki and Gyutaro? Do you think it's destiny or do you think it's choice?
I think it's a little bit of both. A lot of situations, and we've seen this now, sometimes, you know, like obviously Gyutaro made the choice to be turned into a demon here, but everything that like happened to them leading up to this wasn't his choice. He didn't choose to be born into this low, you know, income household. He didn't choose to be born ugly. He didn't choose, you know, to have to live without parents because clearly their mother died not long after Ume was born. But here is my soapbox. The parallels between our sets of siblings here. It's actually, and this kind of goes more along with destiny and not a choice than it goes with choice. Because we have Gyutaro and Ume, who were victims of humanity and the world and what humans do in very evil situations. And a demon was their savior. Nezuko and Tanjiro had a good life. They were not victims of humanity. They were victims of a demon attack. And a human was their savior. A slayer, specifically. So they go along with each other. They're just opposite sides of the coin, truly. And I think that's so important for the story to see what can happen on the other side of the coin. Did it come down to the choice? Yes. At the end of the day, Tanjiro chose to become a demon slayer. And Gyutaro chose to become a demon, right? But everything that led them to that moment was not their choice. That was just what they were born into. And you have to truly wonder, the choice that Gyutaro made, was it wrong? The choice that Tanjiro made, was it right? We're blurring the line now. You know, what is right and wrong? Well, we can still pretty much assume that it is right to fight against the demons because most of them are still committing murder in large fashions with no remorse, right? But you can't pass up on the fact that what led them there, you can't blame them because humans absolutely were evil in Gyutaro and Ume's life. They just aren't these super powerful monsters that can eat humans, but they still literally tied up a 13-year-old girl and burned her to death.
I'm gonna lean more towards the side of choice. And because I don't think it was, I think there's destiny. God, I don't know why this is taking me back to like a high school history class. What was, I know that this is such a stretch. There was a take on Christianity back in like the 1600s where God was seen as a watchmaker. He made the watch. Once the watch was complete and fully functional, he stepped away from it. I believe that that's kind of the approach I'm taking here, that yes, they were born into a system that was clearly stacked against them. There was no way Gyutaro was going to be any sort of a baller in the entertainment district. However, did anyone think to leave the entertainment district? Like, if you're not being entertained, leave, right? So in this sense, right, like, I'm not saying that going out and living the farming life with, you know, your country bumpkin Tanjiro would have been the best choice. However, they didn't have to stay. And it seems like they clearly almost weren't welcome most of the time, especially because of Gyutaro's presence. So I'm going to say that for them, at least, yes, this was partially choice. They chose to stay in a toxic environment in which they knew they were subject to the life that they had. I mean, I'm not going to say that it would have been better anywhere else because I don't know, relational context in the Taisho era of Japan, specifically where they were, but they might have had a better shot elsewhere. For Tanjiro and Nezuko, though, I think the initial choice Tanjiro made to stay behind with that man probably is what saved the rest, is probably what saved Nezuko. I say that for the reason being, had he gone up there that night, we've seen how much power Tanjiro has when he's emotionally charged. I can only imagine him as a fresh out the gate demon watching his family just being entirely slaughtered. I don't know if Nezuko would have survived that, nor the rest of his family's bodies. Like, we've seen the way that Muzan's blood has affected Enmu in the lower rank meeting. He was already in the 12 Kazuki, yet he was visceral. To watch Tanjiro take on Muzan's blood and then try and have some sanity afterwards, I don't think it would have happened. So I think the choices made definitely led these people and led these characters to where they are.
I think you both spoke very eloquently on this, and it's really hard to say. I'm going to say that I think I'm somewhere squarely in the middle. It is a bit of both. I do think one area where I might differ from Bryan's opinion here is that, like, at the time that this happened, they really were still children. And so I don't know how much agency they felt that they had to be able to leave their situation. Granted, it's hard to say. I don't know exactly how old Gyutaro was, but like Ume was 13. It's quite young. And when you're already born into like a place of poverty, it's that much harder to have the means to get out, to like have the money to travel to get out, to have
Fair.
Any of the resource or the connections. Clearly, like, as they're having their dying moments, nobody's willing to help them at all. So it's like two of them against the world. And that's hard for anybody, but it's really hard for kids. So the odds were already stacked against them. And, we talk about like privilege and like being acutely aware of like what yours is or what benefits you might have. And there are like visuals of like ladders or like stairs or things like that. And it's like, this is what a step might look like for somebody with the resources. And this is a step for somebody without them. And so I think that they were born into a disadvantage. Does that mean that the choice he made to become the demon was correct and to bring harm to those people? No, but in some ways, was it very human of him to choose to lean into that revenge? I kind of think that it was, given the life that he had. Like, is it right? Probably not. But at the same time, like, is it right for him to have like avenged his sister in killing that samurai? With the context we have, I'd say we probably would have been rooting for her rather than the samurai. So it's hard to say. Obviously, they've taken that notion and brought it to a whole new level that is no longer okay. And they've lost a great amount of their humanity. And in that, there has been some choice, but I don't know that it began with a viable choice for the two of them. I don't know. Maybe more, maybe less than some of the other demons that we've seen, but I definitely have a little bit of sympathy for these two. And I think that might continue as we see more demons.
Yeah. And I just have one last thing to say about the parallels because I know we're going to move on from them in a moment here. Their little interaction in the afterlife before they like walk into hell. More parallels between them and Tanjiro and Nezuko. The one I specifically want to call out is them mentioning that we'll always be together, because Tanjiro has specifically said that about Nezuko. And then Ume getting on his back and them riding or walking off into hell with her on his back was a very, very like extreme parallel, in my opinion. And to piggyback off of what you said, I when it comes to them leaving the entertainment district, I don't know if they could have, like, if she was working at a brothel at 13, right? Which probably means there was like, they had some kind of debt or some kind of like they had to pay someone. They explained it earlier in the season where like if you try and leave, like you can't always, like that's like the law would come after you or something like that. I don't know. That might not be the case for them because he was a debt collector. I don't know if they had debt themselves, but it's also an interesting thought to think of.
Sounds like they didn't have JG Wentworth back then.
Oh my gosh.
No.
All right. Well, rippeth to Gyutaro and Daki. They were there for a good time and a long time, but it's come to a close. So some good lessons learned, some good parallels, and I'll be interested to see how some of this might carry into any future demon fights because we have officially won the Entertainment District battle here. They have both passed on. Tanjiro and Nezuko released the last of their little demon green dust ash things into the air, and the battle is truly done. As we begin to close out this episode, late to the party, or a queen is never late. Everyone else is just early. We get to see a little bit of Obanai. Yay! Of course, he shows up at like the last possible minute, and then he teases Tengen for getting terribly injured. And Tengen tells him, "I'm gonna retire, man. Like I can't fight anymore. Look at me." And then Obanai says he can't retire because Rengoku's spot is already still open and none of the youngsters are skilled enough to take a Hashira spot. But Tengen disagrees, and he immediately references Tanjiro. This is the first time that we get to hear Tanjiro referred to as Hashira material. What do you think of that?
I love this scene. Not because I love Obanai. In contrast, because of how much I love Mitsuri, you would think that I'm like also an Obanai stan. Obanai is But with that being said, I love that Tengen kind of throw this in Obanai's face a little bit. He's like, that young Kamado you hate so much. And I mean, you can see his eyes just go, he survived. He's still alive. After all of this, points to an entirely destroyed city. And I was like, that's our boy. Oh, it was just too perfect. Also, him calling out, I guess you guys do deserve congratulations because you did defeat an upper rank, even if it was the lowest. I was like, my dude, come on.
First of all, shout out to K-Pat Mosh again. She just put out a skit where she talked about Obanai being late and he had to like stop and buy boba for Mitsuri, and then like had to stop and let his snake have like go to the bathroom because he's like potty trained, and he did all this after he got the distress signal. And Tengen was like, how could you? Me and my wives and my kids almost died. And I was like, kids. Because Tengen's a dad now. He's officially a dad of the Kamaboko squad. But I cry every time. I love how this whole scene worked out with him kind of saying like, I don't need your congratulations. And, you know, I think Obanai's words were like, all the youngsters are dying out or something before like they can reach their full potential. And so like in his mind, he thinks he's talking to the sole survivors of the Entertainment District. And he knows at this point probably that Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Tanjiro were there. So he's just assuming they're dead, right? And Tengen, and I will say I love Inosuke and Zenitsu, but he specifically says Tanjiro. And of course, Tanjiro's our main character. But just like the way he goes from that young guy you hate, and then it goes to Tanjiro, and Obanai's like, he survived? Kamado Tanjiro. It's just such a great, powerful moment. And then the soundtrack, it's all grand. And Tanjiro's just riding on his sister's back, just like piggybacking, just like looking around, trying to make sure that everything's all good. Probably looking for Inosuke and Zenitsu so he can like go to sleep. And it's just, as a Tanjiro stan, I can't help but tear up every single time for this scene because he's really come so far. He still has a long way to go because I don't think he says that he's ready for it yet, but he's close. He's getting there.
A diamond in the rough, indeed. He is going to shine, and he continues to get better in every battle, and he's survived every battle, and that's already a landmark achievement compared to a lot of his peers. So very excited to see what the future holds for young Mr. Komodo here. And to close out our season, we get to see our boys celebrate. It's a beautiful, tear-filled moment, not dissimilar to things that we've seen in other seasons. Tengen joining in a little bit this time, hoping that whatever comes next is going to be flashy for them, and I'm sure that it will be. But one moment to close this out that is very stark in comparison to the joy of winning the battle is a flash to Ubayashiki. And we haven't seen him in a while, but he is so proud of everyone at the entertainment district. And he makes a proclamation that the Demon Slayers, are definitely going to defeat Muzan in this generation. And then he calls Muzan the sole blemish on his family. What? Ubayashiki, leader of the Demon Slayer Corps? Muzan? His family?
Okay, first of all, if I wasn't crying with the proclamation of Tanjiro being like almost Hashira material, now I'm crying over Ubuyashiki just being so excited. Again, the music is still going. It's just so beautiful. It's powerful. It's like celebratory. We're getting a happy ending out of this. This is something we haven't gotten in a while. Like our last movie or our last arc, we're all crying because we just lost someone that we fell in love with, right? And here we are. All of our team is not only okay, they are retiring with their wives or being proclaimed as the next, the next best thing, for what's to come. And now we're getting Ubuyashiki, who's saying that this hasn't happened in 100 years, right? No one's been able to take down an upper rank demon in we know the certain year, but I'm not going to say it because it's in the next episode. So just in case people are listening in that haven't watched the episode yet, but it's just so powerful. And you feel like it feels like the tides are changing in this moment. It feels like, okay, like obviously the upper moons we've had to take on, they've been hard, but like clearly those just kind of, or the lower moons, the lower moons, most of the Hashiras had to kill one in order to become a Hashira. So like that's normal. But the upper moons, that they haven't been touched by them. So things are changing. And was it a hard battle? Absolutely. But at least we're getting somewhere, right? And then we get this bomb drop of him saying the sole blemish on his family. So we're not only getting this like beautiful celebratory moment, we're getting this new like twist. We're getting this new like, what? I almost missed it the first time that he said that. I was like, I'm sorry. So what does that mean? Well, I think it means that somehow they're related in some way. Do we know? I don't know. But a special shout out to the sound design for throwing in Muzan's little jingle just at the mention of his name in that.
It's all about family, right? That's what Fast and Furious has taught us. So, I mean, at this point, this is definitely something that will counter kind of everything that we see it as, right? Most of the time in anime, we see that there is a lot of, we are the good guys. We associate as a family, right? Now, this blurs the line in the sense that not that they aren't family, but the good and the bad stem from the same place, possibly, right? The sole blemish on his family. We don't get context as to like how that is meant when he says his family, but we do know that if there is a relation between both Muzan and Ubuyashiki, what's the real battle here, right? Because that's the actual question we're answering. For however long demons have been in existence, they're sure to have been the opposition of them. But what does this mean overall as to the initiation of the Demon Slayer Corps, right? So if this is the sole blemish on his family, it begs the question, where and how did this all start? And I think, sometimes with media closing out a season, you get more questions than you get answers. And I think this is one of the, demonstrations of that now we have this food for thought going into the next season as to, wait, all these questions still weren't answered from last time. Where do we get to see that?
Questions and answers, indeed. I'm excited to get to hear a little bit more, but how interesting just the thought that Uba Yashiki and Muzan could be related to the same family, and what else is there to explore there? What happened hundreds of years ago? We're going to find out, hopefully. Next season on Demon Slayer. Very exciting, but we are definitely at about time. So are there any final thoughts about this season finale before we jump into some favorite moments? Cool. All right. Well, then, favorite moments. I'll go first. There are so many to pick from in this episode, and I think we've already touched on so many of them beautifully. So I want to touch on some that we haven't touched on too much yet. Mine's kind of twofold. I love the mysterious introduction of our upper rank, at the time 6. We touched on him very briefly, but man, he is like a favorite of the character designers and the animators. And while strikingly beautiful, also extraordinarily eerie. So I'll leave it at that. I just loved that introduction. And then at the very, very end, we get a flash to the Infinity Castle, which is upcoming in the next season. And we open on Akaza, of all demons, in the Infinity Castle. And I've mentioned this before. Obviously, we know Rengoku is my favorite. And so it's very strange and very interesting that Akaza is also my favorite of the demons. But there's a lot of intention behind the camera immediately panning to him in the castle, and they are setting him up to stand apart from the other demons. Keep an eye out for him in the upcoming season. Excited to see some more.
Favorite moment for this episode from me, I think it is going to go to Gyutaro reflecting upon his human life. And I think the reason for that is not that Gyutaro is my favorite demon, but I think their story is very interesting in the sense when you have looked through it at, through the lenses that we have and looked at it so closely to really answer, questions about your own humanity in the sense like, what choices have you made, in your life that have maybe not that like one person's choice will cause someone else to do great harm. However, you do begin to question, at some point, was I someone's demon, right? Like, and I think, you start to begin to search for the moments where you see yourself as the bad guy and you're like, wow, you think about how humanity is flawed and how at the same time we analyze this greater concept of humanity, yet we are the individual components of it. So I think it's a very interesting, way to introspect on your own actions by looking at his recount of all of the things that went wrong in his life and the choices that he made following them.
Both very good. But I have to go with when Tengen declares Tanjiro, like, reaching his potential. And everything that follows that, from Ubiyashiki, like, little monologue to the boys just, like, crying their eyes out because they're all okay. And Nezuko's just, like, nestled underneath them, like, I'm here, woohoo, we did it. And it's just like, I love them, and they did it, and they made it, and they're so happy. And they're literally all just sitting there and just waiting for the Kakashi to get there because they can't move, I don't think. So so sweet, so beautiful. I love to see another Hashira really recognizing Tanjiro's potential. This is the first time that we're now getting a Hashira to say that he's got the goods and not just die afterwards. So like, it's actually getting to other Hashira. So that's exciting as well. And of course, I love anything where people are talking good things about my boy.
Agreed. Wonderful moments all around, and many, many more wonderful moments with our fun boys and Hashira and demons to come. But that's all for today. thank you for joining us on this journey so far. We are now caught up to everything that is out, so please look forward to episode 1 of Swordsmith Village soon to follow. Don't forget to give us a follow so that you can see when that new content comes out. We are on TikTok and Instagram at Hashira Half Hour, and we're on Twitter at Hashira Half. Please feel free to send us any questions or suggestions for anything you might like answered. Let us know your thoughts on the new episode as it comes out, and if there's anything else that you might want to see us review on the show. We're looking forward to it. We'll see you next time. Umai.
Umai.
Before I say it, don't forget to also download our podcast. Umai.
Yes.